Welcome to the eShopperReviews podcast, episode 29. This is the podcast for August 2023. I'm Jenn Ip.
And I'm Jake McNeil.
For those new to this podcast, eShopperReviews was previously a subreddit on reddit.com where Jake reviewed games on Nintendo platforms with over 2,200 reviews. However, we are currently in transition to a new home, and in the meantime, you can find all of our new reviews on our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And on that note, all of our content is supported by the kind donations of our Patreon patrons. This month's sponsors are Ben, Andy Miller, Xleen, Homer Simpin, Johannes, Talisa, Francis Ops, Gabriel Coronado Medina, Ilya Zarev, Jared Wark, Christopher Wolf, and Seth Questionfield. Thank you all for helping to keep the reviews coming. Now on to the Patreon-voted games.
So we had a couple of ties in both of our votes this month.
Yeah. So for the all-patron budget vote, we had a tie between Fishing Vacation, Hidden Bunny, and Smash Out.
I never really have anything to say about these games when we announce them on the podcast because I know nothing about them. I haven't played them yet. It's still all a mystery to me. So I'm going in fresh, and I will be the tie-breaking vote and choose at least one of these games to review in the month of August. And I guess at that time we'll find out if it's any good.
The standard vote was a tie between Pikmin 4 and Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals.
Now, my standard line on this, again, is I'm the tie-breaking vote. I feel like some people are going to look at that and go, well, it's kind of obvious which one you're going to choose because you've already done a stream for Pikmin 4. However, there's entirely the possibility that I could choose to review both games. You don't know me. You don't know.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if you did both.
Maybe, maybe not. In any case, I will be reviewing at least one of those two games within the month of August.
All right, so next month's vote this is for the standard vote.
Yes.
We have Blasphemous 2, Fae Farm, Gloomhaven, Mortal Kombat 1, My Time at Sandrock, and WrestleQuest.
For these selections, I tried to pick the games that I felt would be the biggest games for both August and September on Nintendo Switch. And with the September games, obviously, if one of those gets selected, I will just review it when I can get my hands on it, because obviously I'm not going to be able to review it immediately once the poll is closed. You know, if it's not released, I can't get it just yet. But whenever I can, I will get to reviewing whichever game wins within the month of September.
So the all-patron budget game vote includes prior tied winners that didn't get selected. Disco Cannon Airlines, Escape Lala Retro Point-and-Click Adventure, Horror Stories, Pocket Rockets, Rocket Cows, and Zotrix Solar Division. We
get a pretty good number of ties in these polls fairly regularly. And I think a part of that is because even all of the people who are paying patrons don't always vote. And so we get a bunch of people who did vote, and then we have a bunch of selections that only have one vote for them. And so this is my way of kind of not so subtly encouraging you. If you are a patron of this Patreon, I'm not. If you are an eShopperReviews patron, please make your voice heard. Choose one of these titles when the vote comes up, because I like having a clear victor in these polls. I actually don't like being the tiebreaker vote because I feel like that's taking choice away from you guys, and I'd like you to speak out and let me know what you want me to review. All of the games in this particular list, in the list of the budget games, these are all games that were tied in previous votes, but that I didn't end up selecting. And so this is kind of like a second chance for all of these games. At some point, we had votes for all of these, but not enough to break a tie. So now, hopefully we won't have another tie between all of these. I'd like for you guys to choose which of these sounds the most interesting to you. Please let me know.
Now, let's talk about some of the highlights that eShopperReviews covered in the month of July 2023. And just note, these are not necessarily games released in the last month, but games that Jake reviewed that month. And we'll start by talking about the best games.
Oh, you almost never start with the best games.
Well, this month you have a lot.
Yeah, I played so many good games in the month of July. I was really surprised and delighted with some of these games. Like, a lot of them I'd heard good things about, but even then some of them surprised me. And yeah, just good stuff. So are we starting with the best of the best, the worst of the best? What are you thinking?
Okay. Hang on. Okay, we'll start with MLB The Show 23.
So this is the second year running that Sony's baseball franchise has released on platforms not owned by Sony, which is still really odd, but I guess we better get used to it because it's going to become a regular thing now. And that's fantastic because this is a wonderful franchise and Sony didn't take shortcuts in releasing it on the Switch. Obviously, it is definitely compromised compared to other platforms, but it's still quite good. It looks good. I mean, it has some graphical issues, but the animation is amazing. And the gameplay is still wonderful, highly accessible, highly malleable, so you can make it the way you want. With this year's entry, they've added a new game mode that is really kind of cool and is a good look into an interesting section of baseball's history. There's a new Negro League mode looking at that particular portion of baseball's history, and obviously that's going into a very dark part of America's past. But also, this was an important part, not just of baseball's history, but America's history, because this influenced the fight for civil rights. You get a look at some very specific figures within the Negro Leagues. And I do wish that they went a bit further with it. It would have been nice if you could play entire games within that kind of historic setting. But even just this kind of really unique and interesting look at this part of baseball's history really made this a unique and refreshing entry in the genre, even though this is a yearly sports installment. But I mean, it took what was already a really great baseball game and made it something a bit extra.
Next up is Shovel Knight Dig.
I absolutely love the original Shovel Knight and its expansions. And I was kind of disappointed with Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. It had some of the charm of Shovel Knight, but I didn't feel like it played well. And Shovel Knight Dig is another game that's not by Yacht Club Games, the developer of Shovel Knight. It's by a different developer, and Yacht Club published it. But you would be forgiven for not noticing this because it has the same level of quality, the same level of charm, the same style. It looks great. It plays great. It takes the Shovel Knight kind of gameplay and turns it into a vertically driven roguelike kind of game where the levels are kind of randomized somewhat and you have different abilities that you might get into contact with during each run. And while I don't think it's quite on par with Shovel Knight itself, it's pretty darn good. And for any fans of Shovel Knight or those who enjoy roguelike platformers, yeah, this is a must.
We love Katamari Reroll plus Royal Reverie.
We do love it.
You do.
Or at least I do.
Yeah.
So this one, I was pretty sure I was going to enjoy. I think this was one of the patron voted games for the previous month. And We Love Katamari Reroll is a remake of the second game in the Katamari series. And for anyone who's not familiar with the series, the first and second games are generally still to this day considered the best games in that franchise. And this is a franchise where the point of the game is you are rolling a ball, which any objects that are smaller than the ball will stick to the ball. And so as you go, your ball will get bigger and bigger as more objects start sticking to it, and you're just trying to make the biggest ball possible within a time limit. It's a really quirky kind of game style, but it makes for a really, really fun game. And it's really cool when you start the size of a small rodent and you get batted around by the cat as you're, racing underneath the kitchen table. But then later on, your ball is big enough and then you get to roll up the cat into your ball. Yeah, fun stuff like that. And We Love Katamari kind of shook up the formula a bit by being self-referential. The entire point of the game is that it's kind of a tribute game to all of the fans of the first Katamari game. So you have a bunch of fans asking for these really weird, quirky requests that the king of all cosmos is demanding that his son, the prince of all cosmos, fulfill. So you'll have an entire level where it is a Hansel and Gretel style gingerbread house, and you are trying to roll up all the pieces of the gingerbread house to make the sweetest Katamari ball possible.
Oh my gosh.
You have one level where you're trying to roll up the middle part of a snowman, or the head of a snowman, I don't recall which, and make a snowman with it. You have one level where you are constantly racing forward on a racetrack and trying to build up your Katamari while being propelled forward at high speed. It's really ridiculous, silly stuff, but it adds a lot of variety into the core formula, and you still have more traditional levels mixed in there as well. This game doesn't really shake up the formula of the original all that much. It is kind of an upscaled and, high definition version of the game, but it's still visually much the same as the original was, and there hasn't been much added or taken away from the game in terms of gameplay. There are a few exceptions, though. There is the Royal Reverie stuff, which is mentioned in the title, and what that is it's a handful of new levels, although put new in quotes because it's kind of just remixed versions of previous levels. And that's a nice addition, but it's nothing that really is going to make this above and beyond the original. The other thing that this adds is the ability to change up the soundtrack, and you can actually download paid DLC songs from throughout the series to play while you're playing this game, which is fantastic because the Katamari series has amazing music. Overall, this was great when it originally released, and it's still great now. It is a ton of fun. It's super simple and easy to play. And if you've never played a Katamari game, I highly recommend play either this one or the original Katamari Damacy on Nintendo Switch or any other platform it's on. Really, it's all good.
Melatonin.
Melatonin plays a lot like a Nintendo music rhythm game, Rhythm Heaven. And we actually don't have a Rhythm Heaven game on the Nintendo Switch as of yet. So this is kind of a bit of a substitute for one of Nintendo's franchises that is still missing. However, it's not a second-rate substitute, and in fact, in many ways, I'd say Melatonin is possibly a better game. It still has that kind of very, very, very simple gameplay, but kind of compelling in a repetitive sort of way where it builds up songs out of simple actions. But what's really interesting about it is the presentation here is wonderful. Everything looks hand-drawn, and it has this kind of pastel art style that's really unique and wonderful. And it's all based around this idea of all of the levels in the game are based on the dreams that your character is having. So there'll be these really weird things based on a simple premise. Like one level is entirely based on food. So you'll have all kinds of food going around on screen. One level is based on work, and it'll basically have, copies of your character a million times over on a screen that's shifting back and forth, and you have to use cues from this character's repeated actions to know when you're doing things. One is based on dating, and you are flicking left and right on a dating app in time with the beat. It's really clever, really well done. The music is catchy, not super, super catchy, but then Rhythm Heaven has never been really about the music so much as the process of making the music. And this is kind of the same in that regard. Really great music rhythm game. I, again, highly recommend it to anyone who likes games in that genre.
Tunic.
Tunic is a isometric Metroidvania. And I know that there's been some argument about this online about whether or not it can really be a Metroidvania. And you know what? I'm calling it a Metroidvania. Just because it is from a isometric top-down perspective doesn't change the way that the levels are structured, the way the game progresses. And in that respect, it's pretty good. But what I think really sets apart Tunic from other games in the genre is that you really have to be observant of the environment to kind of figure out how you're supposed to progress forward. You're supposed to look around and figure out, oh, I can probably do this over there, or I need to get there, and that means I'm not explaining it very well, I know. But it's very clever at how it subtly how it hides the clues of where you're supposed to go and what you're supposed to do in the environment itself, as well as there is a instruction manual that you unlock as you go through the game. It's like when you got a Nintendo game, you got an instruction manual with it. With this game, it's like you're piecing together that instruction manual from the original Nintendo Entertainment System as you progress, and that is giving you hints as to where you need to go next. It's a really clever plot device that makes this kind of a bit special and interesting. One thing I will say is the combat is really difficult, surprisingly so, for a game that looks so cute and cuddly and simple. So this isn't going to be a game for everyone. More casual players are probably going to find this game to be a bit more difficult than they're wanting. But otherwise, this is a really fantastic game, and I recommend it to just about everyone. It is great.
So the last one for best games,
yes,
is Chained Echoes.
Now, Jen, you've been hearing me talk about this game a lot this last month. Those who've been regularly listening to this podcast know that I got super hooked on Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which we might discuss a bit more later in this podcast. Afterward, there was like this emptiness in my soul where I was looking for something to fill that missing gap or something. And last month I found I think it was a graphic adventure or something like that I really liked, that managed to tear my attention away from Zelda for at least a bit. This month, I was surprised because I got another game that really grabbed onto me and just held on. So Chained Echoes is a JRPG with turn-based combat that's very reminiscent of classic entries in the genre. And you can see that it was inspired by a lot of these. You can see inspiration from Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, and a lot from Xenogears back on the original PlayStation.
Oh, okay.
The story takes a lot of cues from Xenogears, and also there's mech combat in the game, which is kind of like how Xenogears did it, but not quite, and it's complicated. And there is a lot of stuff going on in the background of this game. There are a lot of complex game systems, so I don't recommend this to people as their first JRPG.
That's fair.
But if you're a fan of the genre, this game does so much right. The characters are wonderful. The overarching plot is really interesting and has fun twists and turns. There's all kinds of secrets hidden throughout the game. The combat is interesting, and it has this character swapping system that makes for a lot of strategic decisions during combat. There's so much that this game does that is wonderful, and I had to tear myself away from it to just move on to other things. But I think I played, I want to say 40 or 50 hours of it. It is a really great JRPG. This came out in 2022, so it's not eligible for my Best of Awards this year, but it will be very close to the top of my Games That I Missed in 2022 award later this year. I'm almost certain of it.
All right, let's move on to the worst games.
From the best to the worst.
Yes,
yeah,
why
let's
not?
do it.
All right, so we'll go with Collab Ball.
There's really not much to say about Collab Ball because Collab Ball is really not much of a game. Collab Ball is a platformer where you are moving around a ball, jumping from platform to platform. This is not necessarily a bad thing. There are certainly good games that use the same conceit. But the problem is that the platforming in this game is sluggish and not responsive enough and just not at all fun. There's nothing visually interesting about the game. There are about 1,000,001 better platformers on Nintendo Switch, and I just see no reason for anyone to bother with this really dull, dreary platformer.
Okay, I don't know quite how to pronounce this.
Yeah.
Either it's an os or nos.
I would go with NOS, but really it could be either.
I mean, okay. It stands for New Operating System.
And New Operating System is technically in the title, so I suppose technically the title is NOS, New Operating System.
Mm-hmm.
To some extent, I can't necessarily blame the game itself for what it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And what it isn't is an actual operating system. I can't blame the game because if this game did what it needed to do to be a genuine operating system, Nintendo would never allow it on the eShop. Like, to have access to other games on the system, to be able to change system settings, Nintendo's never going to allow another game to do that. At least not one that they themselves create. So this is not a operating system. It is designed in a way that imitates the look and feel of an operating system, a GUI like Windows or something. And it has within it a bunch of apps. Like, there's an app where you can write notes, or there's, I think, a calendar app. And there are a few simple games there too. Like, I want to say, I think there's a snake game, and so looking at this as an app collection, all of the utility apps are pointless. Your phone does all of this stuff way better with way more options and way more malleability.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you be like taking text notes on your Nintendo Switch when you can just do it on any smartphone released ever? And the games are so simple as to be pointless. You will not play this for more than a few minutes before moving on and never going back to it. And as a result, what you're left with is a app, so to speak, that is interesting as a novelty, but not much else. And then they had to go and make things worse because this is one of those game publishers that publishes each of their games as many times as possible, including free DLC and different releases so that they have an excuse to release it multiple times. And it's basically a sleazy tactic so that they can junk up the eShop with this game in hopes that you'll buy it. I understand the novelty of the game is one of its big selling points, and if you absolutely want to have something on your Nintendo Switch that calls itself an operating system, more power to you. But trust me, you will get nothing else out of it beyond that because the actual utility of this app is pointless and the actual games housed within it are disposable at best. Yeah, don't bother with this.
American Man.
America! So, American Man plays a lot in theory like the Contra series, where you're running around as a shirtless Rambo-style dude with a machine gun gunning down animals that are trying to kill him. I'm not even going to get into the politics behind that, although it's fun to joke about the America-ness of it. Just talking about this as a game, regardless of what you think about gunning down a bunch of, apparently they're evil animals who've been trained to kill, good, hot-blooded Americans, so we need to kill them all. It's ridiculous. Putting that aside, the game itself is really awful. The visuals are repetitive and dull. The gameplay is not at all fun. The level design is horrible. You'll end up dying a bunch because the levels are designed in a way where it's just impossible to realistically progress without taking damage. There are so many good action platformers on Nintendo Switch. Do not waste your money on this one.
The last one is Crypto Mining Simulator Ultimate Trading Strategy Tycoon Craft and Idle Game 3D. Don't you love these titles? Aren't they great?
I'm starting to wonder if maybe I should just stop reviewing games with titles that are ridiculously long like this in hopes that they will get more search results or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I try not to let a game's title make me prejudge that game, but it's really, I'm starting to see a very strong pattern here. The thing is, Crypto Mining Simulator doesn't seem like it was necessarily a low effort game.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely looks like some attempt has been made to put a lot of interesting detail into this game, but so much of that is lost because the game itself is absurdly poorly designed in ways that will make you want to quit it within seconds of starting it.
Ooh.
The frame rates are, I swear they must be in the single digits. They're that bad. They're some of the worst frame rates I've ever seen in a Nintendo Switch game. The game refuses to be played in docked mode. You actually need to play it in handheld mode in order to progress past some menus and stuff. However, the text in the game is so tiny that you'll be struggling to read it on the tiny screen of the Nintendo Switch. And on top of that, the game doesn't provide you with any instruction of what you're supposed to be doing beyond the simple, you need to buy this, this, and that, without telling you what the differences are for your purposes. So it's ugly. It forces you into handheld mode and then makes it impossible to read the text. And it doesn't tell you what to do. I could only play this game for a few minutes before throwing my hands up in the air and saying, I'm not moving forward with this. There's just no point. The game chugs. It's a slideshow. I don't know what to do in it. It's hard to read anything. So I couldn't actually give this game a standard grade. I ended up giving it an NA with an F in parentheses because this is a torturous experience. And it's also an unplayable experience in, I would say, very nearly a literal way.
Wow.
So don't waste your money on this one. Don't try to play it. And if you do, you won't be playing it anyway because the game doesn't seem to want you to play it.
Okay, so let's get that taste out of your mouth.
Let's hope so.
We'll move on to the hidden gems.
Yes.
Starting with Remains.
I wanted to give Remains a better grade than I ended up giving it. I ultimately ended up giving it a C+ because it has one major flaw that I just couldn't get past.
Mm-hmm.
And that flaw is this game has menus that require a touch screen input, but the text is too small to really be read on the Nintendo Switch's screen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's definitely a problem. I mean, obviously it was also a problem in my worst game of the month, but that game also had other stuff making it bad.
That's fair.
Apart from that problem, I really, really enjoyed this game. I could see myself playing this game for hours and hours on end. The premise of Remains is very reminiscent of the Sandra Bullock film Gravity, where you are on a space station that has a calamity, has some sort of explosion or something go off. And so you are stuck in the middle of space orbiting Earth, trying to piece together bits and pieces as they're floating in the debris field around Earth to build yourself some sort of way to get back to safety. And This is a survival adventure game, and normally I hate that style of game. Normally it just makes me really on edge, and I just don't like that feeling. But I don't get that kind of feeling from this game because the fact that you're in a debris field, you're basically surrounded by stuff that you can work with, and it feels like you're never at a loss for resources. You are in an abundant field of resources. It's just a matter of seeking it out and getting it.
Okay.
And it made it a really calming experience for me. Just floating around, trying to spot what I was looking for, and then floating over to it to grab it. As survival adventure games go, yeah, this is one of my favorites in the genre. And I just really wish that it had this one flaw that it had fixed so that I could enjoy it better on Nintendo Switch. Mm-hmm. If you can put up with that flaw, the fact that you need to go into handheld mode to go through some of the menus, I absolutely recommend this game. It is a wonderful experience within this genre. As it stands, I couldn't recommend it as one of my top games this month because that is a pretty severe flaw. But I still definitely wanted to list it within my hidden gems at least.
All right. The last one for the hidden gems is Penco Park.
Penco Park is basically an off-brand Pokemon Snap.
Okay.
The Penco creatures are, these little 2D creatures. It's a 3D game, but you're taking snapshots, photographs of these 2D creatures in all sorts of wacky, some are flying through the air. Some of them are trying to disguise themselves as rocks. Some are floating in lava. And they're, these kooky, crazy creatures. Again, very reminiscent of Pokemon Snap. It's a very low-budget affair compared to Pokemon Snap. And it's missing a few of the features that Pokemon Snap has. And, well, I'm thinking specifically of new Pokemon Snap. However, if you enjoyed the Pokemon Snap games and want something else that's along those same lines, this is the perfect game to just jump right into. It'll be very familiar to you. And it's just an all-around fun game in that same style.
So, we have a couple for the other noteworthy reviews.
Yes.
We'll start with Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon.
Bayonetta Origins is, I feel, a pretty noteworthy game because it is a release from Nintendo. This game does not play like the other games in the Bayonetta series. It doesn't have the same tone as the other Bayonetta games. You're not playing this self-confident, powerful character going and beating the crap out of enemies. You are playing actually kind of a stuck-up and annoying little girl who has kind of almost mistakenly entrapped a demon and put it in the body of her stuffed bear.
Oh.
The game uses a really clever kind of two-character style system where each of the characters has their own specialties. Cereza herself can interact with objects in the world, and she has spells that she can use to hinder enemies. And the demon is the one who's mostly going to be doing the fighting in the game.
The hard work.
Yeah. The gameplay is good. It's clever. I would say the opening of the game is a bit slow for my tastes. But overall, it's a solid game. I didn't like it enough to put it within my best games, but it's good. So yeah, if you are kind of curious to see the Bayonetta universe expanded, but don't mind the fact that this game plays, looks, and sounds almost nothing like Bayonetta, I'd say this is still well worth playing. If you have no interest in Bayonetta, maybe all the better, because this game doesn't really depend on you knowing anything about the Bayonetta series. It's kind of got this fairy tale atmosphere. So yeah.
Cabin Escape, Alice's Story.
This is one of the patron-voted games for the month of July. And as it turns out, it's not really a full game. This is more of a prologue to the Forever Lost episodic game series. However, it's $1, and for a half an hour, $1, that's okay. This is kind of an escape room style of graphic adventure game where you are trying to piece together different little puzzles in this cabin that you're trying to escape. And in that respect, it's good. It's not great. It's not bad. It's okay. I guess it's kind of like a little bite-sized taste of what you would get from that game series. As a little bite-sized taste, it's fine. The main reason I'm mentioning this here is because this was one of the patron-voted games.
Okay. So, the last one is Powers of Hex.
This was another one of the patron-voted budget games. I actually reviewed a couple of them. I think 3 of them tied, and I reviewed 2 of the 3. So, you're welcome, America. Still on that American man kick. Anyway, Powers of Hex is kind of like a more magical, wizardy themed Mega Man game of sorts. It's not designed anywhere near as well as any of the Mega Man games. The levels are way too difficult, and it's kind of a bit too amateurish in how they're constructed. But otherwise, it's an okay action platformer. It's not a great action platformer. It's not even a particularly good one, but it is okay.
All right. So, a little bit of housekeeping. Nintendo Switch Online for either June or July. 2023 releases for Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and Game Boy include Mystery Tower, Harvest Moon, yay, Blaster Master Enemy Below, and Kirby Tilt and Tumble.
So I think what the deal with this is that these releases came out in June, but they came out after we recorded the last podcast. And so we didn't talk about them in that podcast, but we're going to talk about them here.
Mm-hmm.
So for all of these games, I feel like each of these games has a niche audience. Not all of them are going to appeal to most people. Out of all of them, I liked Kirby Tilt and Tumble the most. This one actually recreates the motion controls of the original game using either your Joy-Con or Pro Controller. You can, flick around Kirby as a ball using your controller. And that's kind of cool. And it's got tons of charm and really great personality to it. Blaster Master is a decent Metroidvania, although it's limited by its screen size. Mystery Tower is a puzzle platformer that's okay, but it's kind of dated. And Harvest Moon is the very first game, at least as far as what we've got, in the entire, Harvest Moon, Story of Seasons, all of those games. You might recognize that style of game from more modern games like Stardew Valley. The original Harvest Moon is kind of rough by today's standards. It doesn't have a lot of the modern things that we're used to from this style of game. But as a look back at the past of this genre, it's still decent. Pretty much all of these games have something going for them, but the only one that I'd say is truly great is Kirby Tilt and Tumble.
Nintendo Switch Online July 2023 releases for the Game Boy include The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages and The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons.
This happened fairly recently. It's kind of just before we're recording this, more or less, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, just a few days ago. The Legend of Zelda Oracle games were both released at the same time, and I think people were tempted to think that this was like a Pokemon Red, Pokemon Blue sort of thing, but they're actually 2 completely separate games. They each have their own story, they each have their own areas that you're exploring, they each have their own special items that you're using, and these games were built using a lot of the same assets that were in The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. And so, as a result, it kind of feels a bit like deja vu playing both of these games. They definitely don't feel as novel as a truly original Zelda game. However, they are both really great games. They're must play for anyone who likes the Zelda games, and still well worth playing if you just like action RPGs in general. Great releases for Nintendo Switch Online this month.
So, one thing that came up in video game news came from the Video Game History Foundation, which reports that 87% of all video games released prior to 2010 are not in release and are considered critically endangered due to their widespread unavailability.
I'm of mixed minds on this because I kind of wonder exactly what they mean by widespread unavailability. If I go to a used game store or eBay, and if I can buy a game for the Nintendo Entertainment System or the Sega Genesis at a reasonable price, is that considered not having widespread availability because it's not a modern release on a modern platform? I don't know. I don't know how they came to their criteria. I do know that there are a lot of older games that are very hard to come by because they were released in small quantities or just they've become rare and expensive. This bothers me. I definitely don't like the idea that, like, pick a game, DuckTales on the original Nintendo Entertainment System, because it was a licensed game, it doesn't often release. We saw Capcom re-release the game a few generations ago as a part of the Disney Afternoon Collection, and they also did a remake of the game at one point, but you can't get it on Nintendo Switch. I'm not sure if you can get it on the Xbox Series X or on the PlayStation 5. I mean, if we're looking at licensed games, Batman on the original Nintendo Entertainment System was a pretty darn good game, and it hasn't been released in any form since, to the best of my knowledge. You can still buy it if you get an NES and a copy of the game on eBay, but I don't know what you'll be paying for it, and that's kind of frustrating in and of itself. I feel like what bothers me more is, honestly, games that came out after 2010, some of those games are impossible to get in any form because they were only released on digital platforms. I mean, earlier this year, I was scrambling to review Wii U and 3DS games because a lot of the games on those eShops, you cannot buy them now. And there were some really good games on those systems that are not available in any form now, like Crimson Shroud on the Nintendo 3DS. Completely unavailable now. WarioWare Gold, as I understand it, I think they released a hard copy of the game in Europe, but you can't get it in America in any form now. Going to the Wii U, Affordable Space Adventures. That was a really fun original game that you couldn't have on any other platform. It really was designed for the Wii U, so we will probably never see it again because it was only released in digital form and no other platform would really support that game as it was originally released. And that sucks. I hate the idea of these games disappearing. I don't know, maybe you feel differently about the old classic games. Like, I still think it sucks that you have to pay through the nose to get some of these. Like, man, try to get a copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga for the Saturn now, and you're looking at spending hundreds plural of dollars.
I mean, it's really sad that those things are going away, but time kind of does that to things. And it kind of helps you out because you have a lot of old games. You have games from the Atari still in storage.
I mean, yes, but a lot of those games are still really enjoyable even today. And it sucks that modern audiences won't be playing most of them. Not unless they go to great effort to get them. And in some cases, it's not even possible. And then there's games where there's not even any conceivable way to play it, even if you bought it back in the day. I'm talking about like MMOs that are no longer supported by servers.
But that's where private servers come in. Hopefully. If there's support for it.
One of the things that's really frustrating in regards to this report, as it pertains to Nintendo, is how Nintendo makes it a point to hound anyone who is involved in the emulation community who wants to preserve these games. Mm-hmm. And granted, they're concerned about piracy, but they're concerned about piracy in regards to games that they themselves are not selling. Jim Sterling has this phrase that I feel is fitting, which is, it is ethically acceptable to pirate games from Nintendo. Not legally. It is not legally acceptable. You may very well get sued for doing so. But ethically, it's hard to find an argument against it when Nintendo refuses to sell it, when they do copyright strikes on YouTube channels just for showing video of their products. Mm-hmm. You know, they're trying to claim other people's stuff as their own. If you are the kind of person who emulates older games that are not available on current platforms, I mean, be careful because the law might catch up with you at some point. But in terms of ethics, I don't know that I have any argument against that, because it's not like any game developer is losing money over that. They're not selling it anymore.
So, you know how the arcade is more or less dying? I
don't know that I agree with that. I feel like the arcades kind of died off, but then they came back in a new life because now you have all these barcades and everything opening.
Well, not just that, but I feel like the arcades could be a way of preserving and letting the public play these old games. As an idea.
I don't know that I agree with that fully either, because a lot of these older games don't really work in that kind of setting. A lot of them are long form games that you'll need hundreds of hours to complete, or they are more the kind of thing that you would play in a quiet, private atmosphere than a loud, boisterous arcade setting. I mean, I mentioned Panzer Dragoon Saga earlier. That's a JRPG. If you want to play that, you're looking at investing tens of hours into it. You know, would you want to go to an arcade to play this game for years? Yeah, I don't know how long you're going to be visiting.
Either that or maybe an internet cafe. You never know.
Yeah, but I feel like then again, you're opening yourself up to, if a internet cafe or a arcade or whatever were to be hosting these kinds of games, would that be the kind of thing they could get sued for? I don't know.
You know, that's, at the moment, it's really kind of hard to figure out what to do.
Yeah, like I said, for people who are pirating games that are not currently being sold, I cannot defend that legally, because legally there are problems there. But ethically, I wash my hands of it. You do you.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
So, the last thing I wanted to talk about was Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh, and just why did you want to talk about that now?
Maybe
did something happen?
I finally finished the game.
You finally finished it! Woo! So, yeah, I finished this game maybe a month and a half ago, I guess. But I've been holding my tongue on some of the stuff that happens late in the game because I didn't want to spoil it for you. And so now that the game has been out for a few months, I figured, hey, let's talk about our thoughts about the game post-game. You know, what we thought of everything after the fact. But let's make this a big fat spoilery talk.
Oh, yes. If you are still playing the game and do not want spoilers, stop listening. Stop listening.
Yeah, this is the last thing we're going to be doing on this podcast, aside from, you know, our goodbyes at the end. So if you don't want Zelda spoilers, you can stop now. We'll forgive you. Please visit our Patreon. We very much appreciate it. But otherwise, we're going to go on. We're going to spoil the heck out of Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. So where do you even want to start? There's so much to talk about.
Okay, so, when I finished the game, I called you.
Yes.
I called you up and I was like, I don't think I've played a game that has hit me this hard in several years. And the ending boss fight with Ganondorf Daddy.
Ganondorf Daddy? Okay. Ganon Daddy.
The last fight with him was spectacular.
Now, by last fight, do you mean the entire thing, or do you mean like the last part of the last?
The entire thing. I never expected it to be as awesome as it was.
It was really epic, yeah.
Yes, I did not expect it. I knew that the boss fight was going to be in phases because, of course...
Yeah, you gotta do that.
You gotta do that Dragon Ball Z, like, oh, you know, phase 1, phase 2.
But whatever. You haven't beaten my final form!
Yes, exactly. And there was a final form, oh my god.
Okay.
I should have seen what had happened with Ganon Daddy, but I didn't.
You mean you should have predicted it?
I should have predicted it. I should have seen it coming. He ate his stone and turned into a dragon, and you had to fight him in the air with Zelda, aka the Light Dragon, helping you. And it was a beautiful and glorious fight.
So I feel like the different phases of the final battle in this game had a little something for everyone. Like,
yes.
People who crave a challenge, well, then you're looking more at the first and particularly the second phase of the fight, with him swapping weapons and trying to hit you with various weapons and you trying to fend him off, and the way that he knocks hearts off of you.
Yeah.
Rather than, he doesn't just gloom damage you, he makes it so that you lose your hearts permanently.
Yep.
That's pretty and we're skipping, like, when the battle starts and his life bar fills up like all the bosses do, and then it keeps going all the way to the right. Oh, that was a great way of doing that. Bravo to you, Nintendo.
That was great.
Oh, man.
I also loved how there was, like, you basically had to fight a mini army before you even got to his lair.
Oh, yeah.
I was starting to sweat a little bit because I was like, did I bring enough consumables? Did I bring enough?
I blazed through that part of the battle super easy because I just used my auto build to build one of my death machines.
Oh, my goodness.
And it just killed everything for me.
I didn't. I was getting to the point in Zelda, and people are probably going to hate me for saying this, where I was starting to lose a little bit of interest because I had finished all the side quests that I considered important, and I was, my interest was starting to go towards other games. So,
well, now hold on a second. You said you finished all the side quests, so let's talk about that, because I don't want to skip over parts because now we're talking spoilery stuff. Let's go for it. Going through some of the more memorable ones. You saved Laurelin Village from pirates and helped them to rebuild.
That was cute. I loved that one. That was very cute.
You got your hands dirty in the election in, I think it was Hateno Village, with the fashionista and the mayor.
That was fun. That was, very whimsical. A little bit weird, but
I thought that was great. Like, you don't really get much out of that quest, but it's just kind of cool how you're sneaking around trying to spy on the mayor and the fashionista. Oh man, that was great. You helped the leader of Terrytown get his kid ready to head off to...
that was so wholesome.
Yeah, that was great.
That was so wholesome. What else?
Did you help them to get their racetrack tested in Terrytown?
No, wait, did I?
I'm pretty sure you did.
I started it, but I don't think I finished it, because by then I decided to go beat
Did you build a home in Terrytown?
To do that.
You can build your own custom home in Terrytown.
I need to do that.
I thought you would love that. I'm like, you need to do more stuff in Terrytown. You, specifically, Jenn Ip, you need to do more stuff in Terrytown. Okay, so looking at other mini quests.
I mean, there was the big one with the newspaper.
Yes, that was the other one I wanted to make sure to mention. Did you okay, I think you completed all of the individual ones at the stables. Mm-hmm. Did you meet up with Penn at the end?
I don't think I did, but I was going to. But I enjoyed it. I didn't really... The rewards at the end of it wasn't, like, spectacular, but for those of us who like collecting, like, armor pieces, yeah.
Well, that was the one I think that gave you the frog armor, which means you don't slip in the rain.
Yes. But, like, just each of those individual quests were so fun to do.
I thought they were really creative. You beat Master Koga for the final time, right?
Yeah, that was... You expected the Yiga clan to be back.
You did not find all of the light roots. You did not find all of the shrines.
No.
You definitely didn't find all of the Koroks.
Oh,
God. You didn't find all the bubble frogs.
I don't have time for that. I'm sorry. Well, although the bubble frogs I might go back to.
So, okay, for my part, I'm talking about a lot of stuff that Jenn did or didn't do. Mm-hmm. I did find all of the light roots, which... The only thing that you get for that is having found all of the light roots. Which is not bad because that does multiple things for you. It means that most of the depths are lit up. And it also means that you have a pretty good fix on where most of the shrines are. I did complete all of the shrines. I think I went for max stamina instead of max health because you can only really max out one of those.
Okay.
I did not find all of the Koroks because you're right, nobody's got time for that.
I mean, some people do, but we definitely don't.
I think there's 1,000 Koroks in the game.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I did not find all of the bubble frogs because nobody's got time for that, or at least I don't.
I probably will finish it because I want that armor set.
I completed all of the quests that we mentioned earlier, except I didn't build a home in Terrytown because I was like, this is more of a Jen thing.
Yeah, it is. I'm probably going to go back to do that now.
Let's see, what else?
Oh, and the freaking Ganondorf's servant posing as Zelda.
Ah, yes. Well, I mean, that's kind of part of the main quest because that leads into finding the 5th sage. And the entire game, you're being told about how you need to go to the 4 areas and, help the 4 regions and with their individual problems. And with each of them, you're getting a new sage, which we need to talk about that a bit too. But they don't mention throughout all of this, oh yeah, there's this 5th sage that you're going to need to get too. I mean, Link does have 5 fingers on that hand for rings after all. So, eventually you go down into the depths after this wonderful series of puzzles in this lightning surrounded sky island. And they just such great quest design in this game, like really memorable moments. And then you go down and you have to build your 5th sage part by part. And you have a Rock'em Sock'em Robots moment in the ring with another... Yeah. Oh, really fun stuff.
This was a phenomenal game. This was an absolutely phenomenal game.
I think pretty much everyone is on the same page that actually having the help of the sages kind of sucks a bit. It's cool when they're helping you out in combat, and especially, I think his name is Tulin.
Yes.
Yeah. Tulin, having his help in combat is great because he almost always crits enemies with his bow.
Well, the thing that bothered me, and I ended up just dismissing them most of the time, was they would get in your way.
They would get in your way.
You're trying to pick up stuff.
And whenever you wanted them, you'd have to go and run over to them. And sometimes they would run off and do their other thing. It's like, no, you stay here. I need you for this. The only one that was consistently useful in the way that they were intended was Tulin.
Yep.
Helping you get extra distance in the air. But even then, the moment you hit the ground, it's like, okay, you mean nothing to me now. Except in combat because you crit enemies. And that's just it, is all the sages are somewhat helpful in combat because they take on enemies. But their actual abilities, okay, I do make a bit of an exception for the Goron Sage because that's always helpful when I'm down in the depths and I don't want to waste bombs or items breaking rocks. But it's like, okay, you've done your duty. Now get back in your ball or whatever. Get back in your ring. I don't need you now.
I didn't mind the sages. Even their abilities were helpful. I just really wish they'd stop getting in my way.
They really should have just assigned them a button. Give them a radial menu like you have for some other things. Like, even in your radial menu, there's some stuff that it's like, why is this even here? Like, there's one for the camera, despite that you can just press in the thumbstick for the same function.
Yeah.
And it's like, you could have just put the sages on that, and it would have been way more useful than what you have here.
Okay, so Breath of the Wild was my very first Zelda game. And I liked it. I never thought the sequel could top it.
Yeah, it was... Okay, Breath of the Wild, I don't know. I might still give it the edge just because it was the one that really broke the ground. And Tears of the Kingdom builds on it.
So well.
But it does an amazing job of that. But we haven't even finished talking about stuff like, the storyline from the tears, the dragon's tears.
Oh my god.
Like, you and I are obviously thinking about one specific moment where, what's his name? Rauru has already been basically locked in eternity with Ganondorf, and Zelda is feeling like everything is for naught, and the Master Sword is broken, and then she realizes there's one thing she can do to set things right, but it means basically sacrificing her humanity.
Yep.
And man, that moment was just Ugh. Wow.
I love her character so much because it really shows her devotion and her dedication to her people.
I've heard a lot of people complaining about the voice actress for Zelda, and it's like, I understand if you are a British person and you think that her English accent is not right. Fine, whatever. I understand your frustration. I mean, granted, there's no Britain or UK.
Exactly.
She has a Hylian accent, darn it.
Yeah.
But in any case, I felt like you really got a depth of emotion from this voice actress, and it really punctuated scenes like this specifically.
The very last part when Zelda says that we're home, I was like, the voice actress did a really good job.
Yeah.
I love her character so much. I am definitely getting the amiibo of her.
Oh yeah, that Zelda amiibo that they revealed looks so good, and it's basically capturing one of the most iconic moments in the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, the title of the game, Tears of the Kingdom, doesn't really make sense when you first start it. Like, they were talking about how it's this big spoiler, and then they revealed Tears of the Kingdom. It's like, okay, what is that even supposed to mean? Are those sky islands supposed to be the tears? What is he? And then after you go and collect all the dragon's tears, you're like, oh.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And then, okay, so I interrupted you. We were talking about all of the Ganon fights, and then we're like, no, let's go back and talk about all the other stuff. Let's go back to that final fight in the sky where Ganon, okay, so Ganondorf, I guess. Ganondorf is when he's a dude, and Ganon is when he's the pig monster. So Ganondorf is acting all smug, and then you kick the crap out of him, and he's like, but I have one last thing that I can do, and he swallows his stone and becomes a dragon. And then how it's basically like Zelda as a dragon is summoned and then rescues you, and then you have this midair fight between the two dragons, and you're walking on their backs going from one to the other. Oh man, I can't imagine a better way that they could have ended this game, because it brings it back to the sky, which was both thematically and in terms of gameplay one of the big major elements of this game.
Yep.
It's, this epic battle between good and evil, and oh yeah, the final part of the final fight is not very difficult. It is fairly easy.
It's very,
especially compared to the previous two phases of the Ganondorf fight.
It's a thematic fight.
But yeah, that's just it. It doesn't have to be. It's epic and it's amazing. And then you finally stab the sword right into Ganondorf's, or Ganon Dragon, the Dark Dragon, whatever we call him. Yeah.
Yeah, you stab him right in the freaking stone.
Right in his stone. Get him in the stones. Ha ha ha. No. Right in the stone, which is on his forehead. Then you get this scene with the basically spirits of Rauru and Sonia, who combine their powers with yours to turn back time on Zelda so that she's a person again.
Yep.
And you're diving through the air to get to her. This is the final moment where you have an influence on the gameplay, and you're just diving to reach her as you're both falling toward the ground.
Yep.
And it's kind of a callback to that moment at the very beginning where Link dives off underground to try and reach Zelda as she's falling and can't reach her in time. And it's like, this time you're able to make right on what you couldn't do earlier. There's a really good kind of bookend on the whole thing.
Such a good game.
Yeah.
If you've never played a Zelda game before, please play both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
I still think that you should probably play Breath of the Wild first, because
there's no history without Breath of the Wild. It doesn't hit you nearly as hard.
Yeah. When I reviewed this game, I reviewed it a few months ago at this point. It was only the 6th game in eShopperReviews history, as far as I can recall at least, that received an A++ grade. At least on the Nintendo Switch. I don't recall if I gave Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D on the 3DS an A++.
Either way, it's worth it.
This is one of 6 games on the Nintendo Switch that I gave an A++ grade. The other games are Super Mario Odyssey, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I think this absolutely deserves being on the absolute highest tier of all games on Nintendo Switch. It is amazing. It is a clear contender, if not an almost sure pick for Game of the Year this year.
Oh yeah, I really cannot think of anything that could top this.
I'm not going to commit to that because who knows, maybe something else will come out between now and the end of the year that will change my mind. I highly doubt it, but good luck to you if you are trying to vie for that title by the end of this year, because, man, you got a heck of a fight on your hands. This is an incredible, incredible game.
All right. So that wraps things up for this month's eShopperReviews podcast. Again, we want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon for contributing. Patreon donors are the first ones to gain access to these podcasts, and if you are interested in becoming a donor, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And once again, if you're curious to read any of the reviews or content mentioned in this podcast, you can find these all posted free for all to access at no cost on our Patreon page. Once again, this has been Jen Ip.
And Jake McNeil.
We'll see you next month, and hopefully by then we will have transitioned. In the meantime,
I don't know. We'll see. It might take longer. We're working on it. We're working on it.
In the meantime, we both hope you found this content helpful and enjoyed some good games. Catch you all next time.
Later.